Something a bit different today. I got into a short chat with a subscriber who goes by Chalkboard Guy, an artist in Australia specializing in, believe it or not, drawing on chalkboards. He got in touch initially to ask me a question, and I took one look at his work and I realized I had a lot to say. If I'd have replied to that email and said everything I wanted to say, he would have been rightly terrified. So we're making a video out of it instead. I think you'll find a lot of value from watching this process of analysing Duncan's website. It might help you too. I asked him to send some more questions thinking they'd be specifically about his work, but actually we've got some very thoughtful questions that would be useful to anybody, which we'll get onto at the end. As always, feel free to send me your questions. You might not get a video, but you will get an answer. Chalkboard Guy, or Duncan, as we'll call him, mentioned that he went to a college that didn't prepare him well for the business part of being a creative freelancer, something a lot of us, myself included, can relate to. His first question to me was, do agents care about the age of an illustrator? And no is the simple answer to that. You've got to be able to send an email and use a computer, so that might count out some of the greybeards, but I work with artists ranging between, let's say, 23 to 70 at a guess. I don't ask how old people are usually because it's irrelevant to me as an agent. If you encounter an agent that does care about your age, then they're probably not worth working with. I don't think I would work with an artist under 18 probably for practical and legal reasons, but that's all. So I get the impression that Duncan is a little older. I don't know how old, but that means he's got some experience, but maybe illustration hasn't been his primary focus for a while. Now, if you're straight out of college and diving into freelance illustration, you have no money, but it's pretty straightforward apart from that. For a more mature person, presumably there are a lot more responsibilities one has to consider. Taking some time off to make it as an artist is not practical for someone with a mortgage or kids or whatever else. I'm assuming an awful lot there, but it's worth saying. Duncan wants to get into some more interesting illustration projects. And I think there are maybe a couple of things that are holding him back, but so many opportunities that he could take advantage of with a bit of tweaking to the way he presents his work. So we're going to dive into a quick review of his online presence. Here we are on Duncan's website, thechalkboardguy.com. I like that name, by the way. The design of the website is fine. It's not that flashy, but it does the job. I'm not going to focus on that really. You can see here that Duncan is presenting himself as a straightforward chalkboard artist for local businesses. I imagine that's pubs and bars 90% of the time. So if you present yourself as something very specific like that, you'll get hired for that specific thing, but nobody will consider you for anything else. If all you're showing on your website is pub signage, like this, an advertising agency is unlikely to consider you for anything else. If Duncan were to present himself as an illustrator, that potentially opens up a lot more doors. If I were looking at any illustrator's portfolio, I'd be looking for a unique style applied to lots of different subjects. Looking at the work here, I don't really think the style is particularly unique, but the medium itself is what's unique. Duncan is very skilled at a technique that's reasonably rare. That's a unique selling point. And if I look through the images here at some of the subjects, we get portraits, food, drink, animals, sports, music. Let's see, there's plenty of typography. Got some floral elements here. It's a pretty well-rounded portfolio, man, but the problem is they're all shown as pub signs. So your viewers don't look and see a portfolio full of different subjects. You look and you see a portfolio full of pub signs. So how are we going to get around that for a guy that's making pub signs every day? Two things spring to mind. Cut out all the boring ones, the ones that are unadventurous, functional, promotional signage. If you've seen one, you've seen them all. We don't need all of them. So then, in theory, you're left with the interesting ones with illustrations on them. But they're still pub signs. They're still photos of pub signs. Next step for me would be to crop these photos into the interesting part. Get rid of the boring text and the scenery of the pub around it, and then you've got yourself some food illustrations. You've got some music icons, some portraits, some floral motifs, some stylized typography, and some sports action shots. I suspect this might not be an easy or quick solution for Duncan. Not all his photos will be appropriate for cropping down to the angles and lighting and things like that. Most of these signs won't exist anymore either, but for any new ones he takes, I'd say focus on the interesting part. I want to see close-ups of these portraits. I really, really want to see close-ups of these pastries right here. I want to see a full-colour chalk portrait of Dwayne Johnson. I really, really want to see the detail of this Godzilla picture here. It seems kind of different to everything else, but even if I click through, I'm not really getting the detail that I want. Presumably Duncan owns a chalkboard at home. I think it would absolutely be worth it to draw some detailed bits of food or whatever else and take some photos of them that show the skill and the details, and maybe even a video in the process, something for Instagram. It's probably not always convenient to get a good straight-on photo in these pubs. You might get some reflections, but I think it's essential to start getting the best photos you can of the work you do, the interesting work anyway. Get some advice on how to take the best photos, or just experiment with it. You can probably get what you need with a phone these days. It might mean investing in some portable lighting that you can shine a soft, even light onto the surface, rather than relying on what the pub has to offer, for consistency's sake. And then when you've got 15 to 20 decent cropped images on your website here, they won't look like photos of pub signs anymore. They'll just look like illustrations. You don't need to get rid of them all. It's nice to see a mix. There's a pub theme to a lot of your work, so you don't want to deny that part of your work. These outdoor murals look really interesting, but you've got to show me the details, and you've got to show me the interesting stuff first. Then you've potentially got an international illustration portfolio rather than a local sign writer's portfolio. And the doors are wide open to magazines or publishers, maybe some advertising. Obviously, there's a pub sign writing vibe to most of the work, but that's okay. Think of all the alcohol they advertise. There's got to be 1,000 ads a year that use this kind of traditional pub sign writing style for traditional ales or whiskey or whatever. I could see this chalkboard style working on a cookbook maybe. I think I've even seen a kid's book recently that had a cover that was illustrated like a chalkboard with space rockets and things on the front. Maybe it was a science book. That might be an interesting addition, actually. What are some of the things that are drawn on chalkboards that aren't pub-based? If you're in a school, then maybe some historical scenes, maybe science experiments, a portrait of Shakespeare, or how photosynthesis works. I'm racking my brain to remember what I learned in school. There's a lot, but all of a sudden, I'm seeing a whole new avenue in educational or scientific illustrations. So you potentially got a lot to do, but you do have the creative skills. It just requires an investment of time and maybe a bit of developing your technical skills off the chalkboard. Whether that's scanning your work, if you have a small chalkboard at home, you can draw on it and fit it on a scanner, or more likely you'd be photographing work in a way that's clear and not distracting. Or maybe a more long-term investment could be to learn how to recreate your chalk work on an iPad or a computer. It's not a necessity to do that, but it would give you a lot of flexibility, something to think about. I don't know what your digital skills are like, but it's a good idea to improve them as much as possible. It will definitely help, even for a traditional art form. And depending on the quality of the photos you've got of your existing work, some of this might be a quick fix, but I'm guessing it might take a little while. So let's wrap up this part of the video, and we'll move on to some of Duncan's questions. Question 1 of 7 or 8, I think. Is it best to cultivate your own unique and recognizable style rather than be lured into following trends? Yeah, you should aim for a style that's uniquely you. That's how you get known. If you look like everybody else, then you're just competing on price because there's 1,000 other people out there that are doing what you're doing. For you specifically though, Duncan, it's maybe less of an issue because you're already offering something quite unique. When I saw your name, Chalkboard Guy, it made me think of an illustrator I used to see walking around London. wearing a suit that he'd drawn all over, with a briefcase that had drawings all over it. Now, he used to call himself, or he does call himself, Mr. Doodle. Now, he used to draw on anything in his signature doodle style. He was a pretty unique character, doing what he wanted, doing what he loved, I assume. I don't know him, but I would hazard a guess that he was living as a poor artist, maybe for quite a long time. Now, he now has 2.7 million Instagram followers, and if you've got 2.7 million Instagram followers and half a brain, you are not living as a poor artist anymore. That's an extreme case, but a really inspirational rise to the top, I think. I could also look at someone like Vic Lee, who has made his traditional sign writing illustration style into an amazing success. His work is amazing. He works for huge brands, and his products are sold in the Tate art gallery. He's a national treasure, really, working in an evolved traditional pub sign writing style. The sky really is the limit. Question 2. Failing to take the shot, waiting too long to get yourself out there. At what point should you just take the plunge and try to get your work seen? I remember my gran saying, "Shy bairns get nowt." Could the same be said for the illustration world? Based on that quote, I would say that your grandma was from where I'm from, Yorkshire. I've never heard that quote, but I like it. The fact that you're even asking me this tells me that you think you've waited too long already. The more people you show your work to, the more opportunities you'll find. Be bold, show your work around. Maybe the opportunities you'll get won't be work opportunities. Maybe there'll be opportunities to develop in the form of feedback. I mean, that's what this is, I suppose. I would say you shouldn't be waiting. You don't want to wait, I don't think. You got the skills. Why bother? Why wait? Question 3. At the start of your career, is it a good idea to consider finding a way to be able to work at a reasonable speed rather than have a show-off style that would be unrealistic in the world of commercial art? Good question. I've been turning this over in my mind. I work with artists that can work very quickly. I also work with artists that really like to take their time. I mean, really take their time. And I would say it depends. It depends on how you want to position yourself. If you want to position yourself as quick and cheap, show a quick, cheap style. But if you want to aim higher and present yourself as an artist worth paying the big bucks for, just show the best work you can physically manage. Worry about the technical details later when people are queuing up to give you money. Focus on drawing them in with mind-blowing work first. You should have a way to work quickly for when it's needed, but you don't have to show it on your website. I mean, if a client comes to you and says, "We've got 20k for this project and we want something super detailed," you might tell them it'll take 5 weeks, and they'll say, "We need it in 2. Then you've got to have a backup plan in your pocket. If you're setting your sights on magazines and publishers, for example, you've got to find a happy middle ground between speed and detail. Be flexible. Offer your clients solutions suitable for their budget and their schedule. Question 4. Coming at the illustration world a bit late, is there a way to know going rates for certain work? I know that it's all dependent on experience levels and skill. The idea of pricing your work is quite daunting for the uninitiated artist. I have found it almost impossible to gauge what I could get, even as a starting rate as an illustrator. You're not alone here, Duncan. Nobody knows how to price their illustration work when they start. Coming to it late is not a disadvantage, though, I don't think. You have a good idea of how much you need to earn by now. Decide if you want to be a jack of all trades doing bits and bobs, or if you want to be premium. And that's not a judgment, by the way, both have their merits. It'll take a lot longer to be busy at the premium end, and then you set your prices accordingly. A wall mural like your Jameson's building in the UK might be somewhere between £7,000 and £12,000. Those pastries you drew, which from what I could see look delicious, might be in a food magazine for £200 to £500 each. I've got videos talking more about pricing in detail on the channel, so you should check them out. But it's not easy, and I can't give you a precise answer. It takes time to learn. If in doubt, try to get the budget out of your client first. Then once they tell you what they've got, ask for a bit more. Question 5. I am from the UK, but now I live in Australia. I would very much like to look into working with UK publications and agencies. Should you feel trapped by your geographical location, or in this day and age, is that no longer an issue? Working with Australia for me is hard. Everything takes longer because you always miss each other with communication. We're on opposite time zones pretty much. You're not limited if you're willing to send a few emails late at night or early in the morning. As an agent, I have to do a bit of that. Clients probably aren't going to do it though, so you have to take responsibility for it. It is absolutely doable and probably well worth it because the UK and US budgets will beat Australian budgets most of the time. Question 6. Social media. I am pretty hapless at it. I can't help feeling that lack of followers could be seen as a negative thing by potential clients, art directors, agencies, etc. I was told by quite a few gallery owners in the past that having a good social media presence was very important / almost essential. Well, yes and no. You don't have to show potential clients your Instagram account. They don't need to know that you don't have a good following. I think because you're presenting yourself as a pub chalkboard decorator at the moment, you're limiting who will be interested in following you. If you become an illustrator, then there's a whole other set of people that you might appeal to and might follow you. Everything I said before about showing details in your images applies, and get rid of the boring stuff too. Then I think you'll just need to be consistent and post consistently. I'm not a social media guy really, so I'm not the best person to give you advice here, but I think you should focus on getting the interesting projects first. Post something regularly on Instagram, even if it's just experimenting at home, or maybe some tutorials in drawing in chalk. And then the followers will come naturally once you've got some interesting projects to show. Question 7. Deadlines. Certain artists, illustrators I follow on Instagram, mention from time to time absolutely insane deadlines they have to produce work in. This is usually for weekly magazines. I, for one, find this extremely daunting and even off-putting. Does the fact that the bulk of work that is produced digitally these days mean that deadlines are quite tight, generally speaking, or is this simply the fact they are very skilled and experienced artists and are given these sorts of deadlines because they can hit them? I don't encounter a lot of short deadlines in my day-to-day life with the illustrators I work with. They do exist. But again, you're not alone in being terrified of short deadlines. If you can't do it though, just respectfully decline the project when it comes up. There's no point trying and cocking it up, I don't think. You'll usually have a couple of weeks or more for a monthly magazine, and the artists that are doing crazy deadlines like that, it's like 2 days maybe, they're doing it because they're good at it, otherwise they wouldn't get asked twice. Focus on what you're good at. If it takes time, it takes time. Duncan, Chalky, as I like to call you. I hope this has been useful to you. My advice is not the only advice out there. Get as much advice as you can from people that know what they're talking about, preferably. Even if 80% of what I said here is useless to you, I hope there are some nuggets that might encourage you to try something new. And to you, other viewers, if you made it this far, if you got anything useful out of this video, or if you have any tips for Duncan, let us know what you think in the comments. I'll post a link to his website in the description. I really enjoyed doing this review. I hope you enjoyed watching. Maybe I'll do some more of these if it gets a good reception. Good luck, Big Dunk. Spread your wings, my chalky-fingered friend.